Hello and welcome. In this video I want to show how to render flames and what are two most useful settings to influence this process. Rendering a flame is the process to generate a final artwork from your flame parameters. There is much more to it as just saving the flame as image, so this is worth this separate video about render resolutions. Before we dive into the actual rendering, one word about comparing renders at different resolutions. When rendering flames at different resolutions, this process is a little bit different than, for example, exporting a drawing from a drawing program. When you export a drawing from a drawing program in low resolution first, and then export it again in higher resolution, the variant in higher resolution usually looks better. For example, when the drawing contains circles, these circles will look more clear and nice, but the drawing won't change much. So there is the common sense that the higher the resolution is, the better the result. When rendering flame fractals, this might not always be the case, because due to the fractal nature, additional detail might be created at higher resolutions. In other words, rendering fractals in higher resolution not always scales the basic shape up and makes it look nicer. It may also change the mood of the fractal. For example, when drawing a very thin line, this line may be still a very thin line when rendering at a very high resolution, but there might now occur additional thin lines then, which were not visible before. So the suggestion is to use your rendering resolution wisely. More is not always better. Also, a high resolution needs more memory and computation time. About render quality. The same holds for render quality. Not always the more is better. When you just want to post your rendering at Facebook, it might be not necessary to render with a quality of 4000. The default quality of 500 should be suited well for most cases. Also, the tone mapping is a non-linear process. So when you have a huge difference between preview quality, which is usually 100, and the final render quality, there might be differences in the final output. In this case, you must adjust the tone mapping settings of your flame and render it again. Of course, Swan tries to keep the render results as consistent as possible between different rendering settings, but there are limits to achieve this. Now, let's dive into the software. The render image window. To render your current flame, open up the Render Flame menu and press Render Image. This opens a pop-up window where you can start and watch the rendering process. You may keep that window open and continue to edit your flame. After you made changes to your flame, you must press the Reload Flame button to refresh the flame inside the Render Image window. The render settings you see here can also be changed in the flame editor itself. In the Render Image window, you can change them on the fly to try out different resolution and quality settings more easily. Render resolution. Usually you will experiment with different resolutions. You can select them here using the resolution list box. Please note that the resolutions are filtered by the image orientation. So when you are missing a certain resolution, you may have to change the orientation first. Defining your own render resolutions. There are a lot of predefined resolutions in Swan, some of them named, but you can also define your own resolutions in the application settings. To do so, you have to go to Rendering and then Custom Render Resolutions. Here you can add and edit your own entries, which then will be displayed also in both the main flame editor and the Render Image window. Render quality. In the quality list box, you can select the desired render quality. Defining your own quality profiles. There are some predefined quality profiles here, but you can also create your own quality profiles. To do so, you have to go to Rendering and then custom quality profiles. Here you can add and edit your own profiles, which then will be displayed also in both the main flame editor and the render image window. Swarm size. The swarm size influences the amount of parallelism of the render process on the GPU. The higher it is, the more faster the rendering is, but the more the GPU load and the GPU memory consumption is. Also, very high values can influence the final result in a negative way. When increasing the value higher than 1000, also the quality should be increased. Technically spoken, the reason for this effect is that when you have a very high swarm size, the rendering on the GPU is finished so fast that there are not enough fractal iterations at each iterated point to reach a stable state. But this very depends highly on the actual flame. So the program cannot predict the exact optimal values here. Iterations per frame. The iterations per frame stink. Does not affect the result, but might slightly affect the render time and the responsibility of the application during rendering. So higher values increase the rendering speed slightly, but may cause the application to react more slowly to button clicks. Like pressing the cancel button. You may cancel the render at any time. In this case, the image is tone mapped at the state you cancelled the render and the result is displayed. When rendering an image of an animated flame, you may also specify the frame number of the frame you want to render. But you still can only render one image here at once. For rendering animations, there is a dedicated render animation window. There will be a separate video about this topic. Changing the image brightness. When the final image appears too bright or too dark, adjust the brightness and maybe the gamma value in the main flame editor and render again. You find all tone mapping related settings under tone mapping node of the flame. Accessing your rendered images. All rendered images are saved as .png files into your image folder. You can access your image folder at pressing the Images folder button in the right toolbar at any time. By pressing this button, a file browser opens up and you can here view and manipulate your image files. Changing the image folder. You can change the image folder in the application settings. Here go to the folder section and change the images folder setting to your needs. This is the end of this video. Thank you for watching and see you in the next. Bye.